Okay, folks, if everyone's ready, we're going to start the meeting now. I am James Koster, your Executive Director of AIA Brooklyn. And first, I'm going to introduce Sarah Drake, President of the chapter.
Thank you, James. Thank you, everybody, for being here at our second launch of our Ask Me Anything event. This is an experiment that we felt was wildly successful. An interactive discussion of not just hearing panelists speak, but being able to immediately, that what they're talking about are things coming from you, not from them. And you will, all of these people have a different relationship to the building community, so to speak, the industry, the practice of the physical environment, and they're all here from different perspectives. So this particular theme, today's theme of is called Parallel Pathways, includes a developer, government or public sector, higher education, and technology. And I'm going to pass the floor to our forum facilitators, Chitra Mamidella. She is the AIA chair. She is AIA and chair of our BKEP, Brooklyn Emerging Professionals Committee, and Mi Zhang. She is AIA Brooklyn's Board of Directors and liaison to BKEP. So anyway, take it away, everybody, and feel free to move around, go to get something to eat or drink. This is interaction, and be engaged, because they're here for you to answer your questions.
And sign in if you didn't already.
Thank you, Sarah and James. Chitra, come on up. These quarterly Ask Me Anything AMA events are really to support and empower emerging professionals. And through that, where the community comes together, we'll be able to create a voice for them and bring more future sustainable goals in place. And we want to have them innovate. We want to discourse back and forth between not just the traditional pathway, but also the parallel pathways that support the built environment. If everyone's an architect, we need an architect in every facet of the domains of this industry. Welcome to this second AMA. And if you've ever embarked on completing your architecture school journey and how, I'd say, the fun and smooth, easy process it was, I'm just kidding. It was torturesome. You'll really appreciate this support of the community, and we wanted to create this platform so that there's a lot more associates engaged and part of this the panel. We want to also invite you to be a future panelist. These are just examples of lives that have been established in their career, but there's also a lot more that we need to hear from associates and emerging professionals. You guys have the questions. So I do want to do a quick round. How many of you, by show of hands, have been licensed for 10 years or more? Okay, great. And how many of you have been licensed for 10 years or less? Okay, great. What about those who have been recent graduates within the 2 years range? Okay, great. Wonderful. So I also want to ask that those who have been licensed over 10 years, just raise your hand again for a second. Okay, you want to network with all of these folks, and then those who have been licensed for 10 years or less, raise your hand again. You want to ask your questions of these folks. So make sure there's this discourse and everybody gets a voice today. There's a little bit of everything for everyone. Chitra, do you have anything you want to add?
Sure. So welcome everyone to our Ask Me Anything Parallel Pathways event. All of these wonderful panelists are here today to answer your questions. So ask them. Ask them about their unique paths, their career journeys, what keeps them up at night. It's your questions that we're here to answer. I'll start off with our panelists. Our first panelist is Jen Grosso. She is the Director of Architecture at AIA Development. leads design for a large mixed-use project in downtown Brooklyn. With over 11 years of experience in real estate design and architecture, Jen's career began as a project architect at SOM, working on major projects for clients like related companies in Avalon Bay. She holds a BArch from Cornell and a certificate in real estate investment from NYU, and also taught architecture at CCNY and Boston Architectural College. She's a former Urban Design Forum Forefront Fellow. Jen researched green cooperative financing and now serves as a Forefront Steering Committee on the committee, reflecting on her commitment to sustainable urban development.
Hi, guys.
Next, we have Hal Rosner. Our next panelist is the Director of Design Technology at FXCollaborative. We're here today, where he leads the firm's strategy for BIM, modeling, and digital integration. With over a decade of experience in architecture technology, Hal's background includes expertise in computational design, data integration, and emerging AI applications. He holds a bachelor's degree in business and computer science from Skidmore College and a master's in architecture from University of Miami, where he also served as a studio teaching assistant. His career path blends design with technology, shaping tools and methodologies that enhance project delivery and innovation.
Yay. Next up, I have the pleasure and the honor of introducing two of my colleagues. Austin Harris, AIA. He is the Director of Design Consultant Management Studio at the New York City School Construction Authority. Austin Harris is Director of that Consultant Design Services, so there's a whole studio for that, where he oversees design projects for New York's public schools. With nearly 30 years of architectural experience, Austin has previously worked at renowned firms such as Grusin Sampton, AIA Associates, Foster and Partners, and SOM. His focus has been primarily on civic and public architecture, including notable projects such as New York City's first net zero public school, a new 72nd Street subway station, and the expansion of Princeton University's Lake Campus. Austin brings deep expertise to civic design and project management. Welcome, Austin. Next, another wonderful colleague, Mark Warren, AIA. Mark is the Director of Professional Alliance Studio at New York City School Construction Authority. Mark's career path showcases a unique blend of public service, architectural practice, and construction management expertise. After establishing his own practice in 2002, he built a diverse portfolio of residential, nonprofit, and commercial projects across the New York's metropolitan area. Mark served as Commissioner of Buildings for Mount Vernon from 2010 to 2016, and later as Assistant General Manager of Construction for Co-op City. At SCA, he focuses on supporting MWBE, minority women business entrepreneurs, professionals through all project stages, promoting sustainable and efficient designs for New York's public schools. Welcome, Mark. We're going to switch over to higher ed. I also have the honor and the pleasure of introducing my dean. I also lecture at City Tech, Sanjeev Vaidya, and he's RA. He's Department Chair of New York City College of Technology, at one of the City University of New York. Sanjeev is an active practicing architect with over 25 years of experience. He has worked at renowned firms such as BKEP and Partners, Davis Bertie Bond, contributing to major institutional and governmental projects. Since establishing his own Brooklyn-based studio in 2005, he has focused on residential and commercial design. Sanjeev also serves as the board of directors at the Architectural League of New York and is a frequent contributor to discussions on the future of public design education. His career serves as an inspiring example of how architects can drive meaningful impact both inside and outside the classroom. Welcome, Sanjeev.
And And I'll take our last panelist, Sasha Topolinska. Say that word. Topolinska. Close, I'm sorry. Sasha is our New York-based designer, educator, and founder of Farm Studio, FARMM Studio, an interdisciplinary design practice that spans objects, installations, exhibitions, architectural projects, and public realm initiatives. As an adjunct professor at both Spitzer School of Architecture, where I am an alum, and CCMY and Parsons School of Design, Sasha brings a strong educational background and a passion for guiding future designers. With a Master's of Architecture from University of Michigan and Bachelor's in Architecture from Lawrence Technological University, Sasha's journey combines traditional architectural training with a commitment to experimental and collaborative work. Her award-winning design projects have been recognized in NYCX Design, supported by prominent institutions like the Center for Architecture and New York State Council of Arts, and the Design Trust for Public Space. Sasha's work includes roles at leading firms such as Tenberg, Architecture and Information, J.G. Newman Architecture. Her career demonstrates a potential of multifaceted approach to design that blends education, research, and public engagement, offering an inspiring model for emerging professionals interested in exploring diverse avenues within architecture.
I do want to first thank you all for coming. You are the most important, and I hope that all of you have filled out a question, and then you will be able to drop it in the box or pass it through the side to James or Chitra and I and just walk it up. I want to thank FXCollab for their generous offer of the space, and there are many opportunities to give back to emerging professionals to support this tough journey that takes, could take 7 years, or you can take 10 years, or you can take 20 years. But it's so important to have that analytic study to be able to contribute to support the society. And Judy, thank you for filming. She's another contributor. Thank you for that. We'll bring you up later. So we'll start with some open questions.
So we have a couple of questions for the panelists to just start the conversation, get to know them a little bit better. Who wants to go first? Okay. I will ask Austin a question. Okay, so Austin, you've worked on diverse civic projects from net zero public schools to subway station. What strategies do you use to address unique challenges of civic design, and how do you balance innovation with public accountability?
I thought about this a little bit, and me will love this answer. But every project I worked on, every client I have worked with, always had a project objective, a project goal. And I've been pretty fortunate to work on some pretty demanding clients. And demanding clients, like the most demanding we had was Princeton University. And they will push you to push the envelope and to come up with something innovative. They said, we hired you because of, SOM, it's your innovation. And so we would test that against how practical it was, or how feasible was it to build it, or how do you maintain it, and do a value judgment on it. So it's kind of like that balancing act. You look at the objective of the client, and then you look at the feasibility of it, and then sort of test it to see if it is going to achieve the objective of the client. Yeah.
Thank you. Who's next?
Mark.
Mark, at the New York NYC School Construction Authority, you support NWBE professionals through project delivery stages. What do you find the most effective ways of fostering growth and quality in these partnerships?
Given some of my history, I think it's fairly simple. One of the things that I found interesting and most vital to the program that I'm in right now is communication, and how we communicate what the SCA or our systems are how they're being used and how they can be integrated into the work that needs to be done. It's very difficult. As you know, I've been at SCA for a year now, and I'm still learning the systems, and that is something that we are propping up the consultants with, to make sure that they understand how to work through our systems. Beyond that, it's really, you know, a white glove treatment as to how new consultants working with the SCA can work through the systems and working through all of our bureaucracy. The bureaucracy isn't bad, it's just that it is there, and you have to be able to work through the systems in order to do work with any of the agencies, DDC, OGS, and any of the city or governmental agencies. And it's put there to protect everyone. And you know, once you know you get over that hurdle, that these hurdles are put there not to get in your way, but to protect society as a whole, I think folks really start to um, get a leap and a stride into doing work with any city agency. I hope that answers the question.
Teach them the whole role of architecture within the construct of
So are you talking about from the architect's point of view or from the SCA's point of view?
managing both.
So again, it would be communicating that information. Throughout my experience, the only way to really get through life is to be able to communicate with folks and to be able to get that message, whatever is on my side of the table, to your side of the table, so you understand exactly what I need. It isn't a dance. Well, it is a dance, actually. It's how you communicate with people, and it comes down to a different level. And you know, in terms of working through the governmental agencies and you know my history, it's all about how you talk to the client. And in this case, the client is a consultant. Well, we are the client, but we need you to do your job. And in order for you to do your job, you have to understand exactly what I need. And it isn't, you know, I'm holding back or having something behind the curtain. The curtain is open. At least that's the way I see it. And hopefully, you know, that broadens the vision of how SCA works.
To that. So here we go. This brings up a really interesting thought for me. So I represent City Tech, one of the largest programs of architecture in New York City. And I think something that Mark said that triggers me is that the training of an architect is really hard and really complex, as some of the newer practitioners are learning. And we keep adding more and more content to what an architect knows. But I want to, this is a nice safe space because everyone here is affiliated with architecture, but I want to call out the public, because I think there's a big problem with architects communicating with the public, and especially with institutions like the SCA, which have to do a type of parametric dance where they have to respond to ADA requirements, they have to respond to programmatic requirements, and sometimes at the tail end of that parametric sequence is the memories of architectural training, which are these very visionary ideals that we sometimes have to forego in the process of responding to all these really difficult challenges. And I think that that is a really big problem for pedagogy, is that the American public is poorly educated, not only in their history, but in design and art and culture. That is something that I think is disappearing. It makes the job of the architect even harder, and it makes our value start to reduce even more. And I think that's a really big problem. I'll make this very brief plug for City Tech. We are the largest program of architecture in New York City. We have 880 students. The education and the training of the public has to start somewhere. And I often want, there are only 2 programs of public architecture in New York City. There are 12 private programs, 12 private programs. If we die, and that's a distinct possibility, frankly, what does that mean for architects and architecture, right? It means that the people who understand the work that you do become smaller and smaller and smaller. And at some point, it's a shrinking where you're just directly designing for the wealthy. So I think it's a really big problem. And I think that agencies like the SCA and a lot of the colleges really find a lot of alliance in preventing that occurrence.
Question, Professor, question to you.
Yeah, please.
Sanjeev, the culture and the public and the comparison to architects. Explain, elaborate a little bit more on that. I really like your opinion.
I think I think there are some countries where you see a general architectural, or not architectural, that's not the right word, cultural enrichment, where people recognize at a younger age what it is to make things, to understand the value of making, right? In the US, it's different. We have made it into a commodity that is quick. Like everyone here has responded to a very aggressive timeline of project delivery. I think there is a movement that I've seen lately of slowing things down and talking about material selection, talking about how users enter and leave a building and the feeling of entering a space. But I think that's a small movement. I don't think that's a broad scale movement. But I look at a lot of other cultures in Korea where people in kindergarten, they're learning carpentry and they're learning how to use tools, right? That's an amazing phenomenon because as soon as you get as a child your hands on a saw and a piece of wood, it immediately triggers your ability to understand, oh, this is a really rich tradition of creating and crafting and building, and it's not something that's been done very quickly. And I think that's a loss that we're seeing in America. A lot of arts and crafts and tradition are being lost. And I know that in our program because we don't have time. We are particularly 3 years behind the curve of every other private school program. And I know that because we have metrics that show that. So, sorry, I don't want to dominate this, but I hand it over. You started it, so let you go.
You want to hear from a new voice.
Sure. So the question I got was, what drew you to your new profession from architecture? Did you think you would end up doing this previously? I had my background is in business and I went to school for computer science as well. So architecture was not on my radar when I was an undergrad. All I wanted to do was play with computers, understand how things worked. And I knew I just always wanted to use computers. So it's sort of interesting that architecture became kind of this sandwich profession that I did for a while before sort of returning back to technology and process. So that's sort of how I look at it, that I just kind of stuck my toe in architecture a little bit, really got to pull together a lot of different skills that I had. Did I think I would end up doing this? I really didn't know what I was going to do, even when I was studying architecture. It really wasn't until I started working and was first exposed to computation, which I didn't even study in school. And it was that kind of light bulb moment where I said, oh, I can use all of my skills together. This is how I can look at data. This is how I can move forward construction. So, so I ended up here.
My question is, what would you tell your younger self? So maybe just to add some context here, I practiced at SOM for a long time, classic architectural education there, right? Technically immaculate, hardworking people. And I work primarily for developers. Now I work in a company that is a development company, but we do it all. So we are both architects and developers. We do our own acquisitions, we design, and we execute our own projects. We've historically done our own sales. So it is a broader narrative arc. And I mention that just because my question, I think, is really rooted in, call it this expanded vocabulary or language that I think I now have had to engage more meaningfully with this more expanded skill set and area of expertise, area of like need to understand within. So in that context, I think I would tell myself, my younger self, to take more risk. I think a lot of the classic architectural training is about risk mitigation, not necessarily for the client, but for the design partners, right? It's about trying to, instead of, like guard your own area of specialty, just really comprehensively understand the needs of owners and what the overall goal of a build project is. It's a cultural point, it's a efficiency point. So you spend a lot of less time, kind of in this kind of owner architect contractor dynamic. And it's more entrepreneurial. It requires seeing the goals of a built project with more priority. The example I like to give is, we just finished phase one of a block, and the way that we talk about one of these projects is first all electric skyscraper. It is a clear message. It's highly digestible, and of course, it's very technical, but it's something that is easy to express and communicable. So as architects, we have to think about those things as well as just call it the like day to day of getting it built.
I got a question for Jen.
Yeah.
So a lot of our colleagues at SOM made this transition from architecture to developer.
Yeah.
What made you make that pivot?
My learning at SOM was for developers, right? I worked for Related and Avalon. I kind of saw how these, very large multi-headed hydras operated. And so I think early on, while you're having an architectural education professionally, you're also seeing how other people are thinking, seeing the other stakeholders and kind of what they care about. So it required, I think, early for me a questioning of like, wait, what are they care about this? This must matter, right? And just a curiosity around that was really valuable. It also, I think Alloy as this architect and developer is different than the Relateds of the world, right? We do one project at a time, and for me, it was really important with my architectural understanding and education to like advocate for the value of a lot of the like really good innovation and design work that we did at places like SOM.
Thanks.
I do want to add that each of you have now a question in hand. You can answer it or you can propose it to one of the panelists yourselves. Or the bigger challenge is if you recall those who rose their hands earlier that have experience or are licensed architects or even not licensed yet, you can direct those questions back at them. Right? Everyone here is an expert at some level and we just want to hear your voice. Yes. Yeah. One more second. We'll get you next, but I want to hear from Sasha.
I guess I'm gonna answer the question that is in my hand. What would you say is the biggest hurdle you have had to battle in your experience? Try to pick one. So something that I have been doing a lot in my independent practice. So I previously have worked for an architecture firms. As I've mentioned, Tenberg was the last architecture firm before I started my own independent practice and went teaching. What my practice and practice of many collaborators that I choose to collaborate deals is working to create more inclusive public spaces, architectural interior spaces. And inclusive, I mean, it's making inclusive spaces for people with disabilities, either physical or neurological. So I think that has been extremely important and aspect of what I've also been teaching my students. And I think maybe going a little bit back to what have been mentioned before, we know that when I was in architecture firms, and I'm not talking only one specific firm, whenever it comes to ADA or creating an inclusive environment for public, it's always something that just comes at the end, right? And it just kind of bites you in this, it almost feels like an unpleasant way, right? It almost feels forced because we often as an architect are not taught to design with people in mind that we should be designing for, because we are the one who actually, we don't realize how much we in charge creating spaces that are around us, how much we're in charge to create spaces that are around us for everyone else. And I think there been a shift in understanding for me, especially I think during COVID and after COVID. I think a lot of us start to feel how it feels to be foreign in our own public spaces, where corners became too sharp, where suddenly people standing too close, that discomfort that you right away felt absolutely everywhere you went. I think for a lot of designers, especially the one that I'm working with, has kind of presented a new understanding or perspective of, and again, I don't think I will ever in my life understand what it is to have a disability, but I think it started to make us understand how uncomfortable environment could be. And if it's uncomfortable to me today, or maybe for this year, there's a lot of people who are living with that discomfort constantly. And I am the one in charge of creating that space. I decide who is included and who is excluded. Each one of us, we are designers, we are architects, we're the one who deciding who is excluded and who is included. And obviously, we don't want to exclude anyone. So here's the answer. I've been battling a lot. I've been battling a lot, proving why inclusivity is important. It's been really difficult also educate in school. I teach at City College, as I mentioned, at Parsons, and I taught at Pratt. And it's definitely something that's been a battle, is to explain why it is important when this is just something not within our kind of common sense, right? To think about other people and include as many people as possible in our design solutions. And so the battle has to do a lot with kind of teaching within that environment and trying to prove how design with inclusivity also does not necessarily restrain your design choices, right? Because a lot of architects and designers and students would say, well, but I want to design something cool. Why would I restrict myself into not doing stairs, for example, versus ramp? And I think that the problem comes is that we don't understand that if you think about it at early stage of design, you can come up with you can come up with a great solution. Obviously, if you throw that somewhere at the end, it will be forced on you. It would feel like it's suddenly changes things dramatically, right? It changes the plan, changes entire project, and then you start to experience that unsatisfaction with that as a requirement rather than thinking about it at the beginning. So I think I guess this is a battle that I personally fighting as an educator and as a practitioner, is proving clients also why accessibility, inclusivity should be one of the first things that we need to think about, or something that we need to be thinking about all the time when we're designing, and how important it is in our education as well.
I just would like if you could talk about the learning curve moving from architecture exclusively towards development. When I think about development, I think about an acquisitions team, the financial side of things. Can you talk a bit about that and the learning curve essentially, please?
Absolutely. There are definitely technical differences. There are also very practical ways you can build, like, call it a more analytical skill set. So I did like a certificate of real estate investment. It is just a couple, or like I guess 6 classes that go into like the literal math of it all. It is at the end of the day just, getting familiar with language being used. A lot of the learning and a lot of the, call it, growth was understanding like priorities in a development, and to an extent relinquishing some of the things that you would have fought tooth and nail and not understood why a developer wouldn't want to do this, and like trying to understand a more expanded set of like critical path and need. There was definitely a lot of like reprioritization for the benefit of the project to be done. And a lot of that is in conversation, right? Like there's the skill set of it all, but a lot of it was just like listening to people who've been doing this for 15 years, built their own company, how they thought about it. And that was fundamentally different. And I think an exciting like moment to like, or growth opportunity, or a moment of growth in my own personal thinking around the built environment.
Thanks, John.
I have a question for Sanjeev. If you could design a building or project that represents your career journey, what would it look like and why?
Yeah, I hated that question, so I'm not going to answer it.
Okay, you can then talk about what.
Yeah, I don't want to talk about me. I think that what I want to talk about is maybe a little bit more about the journey, and I want to respond to some stuff that Sasha said, which is, the word inclusivity is really an important word, but I have a feeling that everyone here is probably sick of hearing the word sustainability, and we're sick of the word diversity. Our program represents 140 different countries. 85% of our students identify as students of color. The languages heard in the hallway are multifarious, and they're from every part of the world. And yet, people group together, right? If you speak a language, if you look a certain way, you're going to look out for that person. You're going to go and be with that group. So I think there's something really interesting that all of us here as designers, as architects, as planners, need to figure out how to recognize that in the general public. How do we recognize and hear and see what makes a particular tribe tick, what they look like, what they sound like, what they eat, what they smell? These are the things that are really, really important and often not talked about. We talk about diversity in these very abstract ways, the same way sustainability has become a thorn in my side because it's not specific, right? And so I think that's a really important thing for designers to grapple with. And I think that's something you started talking about, Sasha, in terms of how do you start to educate the next generation of designers, of architects and planners to recognize that it's not that we all need to be grouped together, but it's that we need to learn about what these things that make us very different, that make us independent, that provide dignity and identity. Those are really important. Nothing to do with your question, but it triggered it from something Sasha said.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I'll answer. Sorry to interrupt you. I work for IMPay, and the work I did there was extraordinary. I got to be a really teeny tiny flea on the part of a really big animal, and I hated it. I also learned that working for celebrities is really not a good way to learn, right? You can't do that. And so I did my time in a celebrity office, and I recognize now as an educator, as someone who stumbled into this academic arena, that's just not, it's not a good, we shouldn't create celebrity architects. We need to celebrate the people who make our schools, right? Who make these places for the rest of the public. Yeah, I'm no joke. I mean, the work of making places to learn is under threat. And I think the new administration is going to change some of the stylistic endeavors of the federal government. And I'm curious to see how the architecture industry responds to that, because the public is unaware. The public is uninformed. The public doesn't know what else is there besides a neoclassical federal style, right? Whose fault is that? I think that's all of us. I think that's us as educators, it's as practitioners. I think that's a responsibility we have. I'm handing it to you.
Preach.
In the architecture and construction career cluster, they say there are 3 pathways in the field, right? Construction, design, pre-construction, and maintenance of operations. How many pathways would you say exist today?
$115 billion. That's what the New York City Building Congress has predicted for spending on construction in 2025, 2026. $115 billion, right? The GDP of Dominican Republic is less than that. The GDP of Puerto Rico is less than that. It's an extraordinary amount of money. Our students, so about 30% of our students are at or below the federal poverty line. So our mission as academics is to start talking about real practical numbers. We're in New York City. Everything here has a number on it. The goal is to figure out what are career pathways, because for our students, going through the architectural education that a lot of you may have experienced just doesn't work. It's not going to work. It's not sustainable. They don't have family safety nets. They don't have people that can pay or sustain the debt of a architectural education. So I assert that there are many different ways to enter the design. And I think that's something that Sasha does, is bringing a lot of different approaches to design, to development. I think that's something that ties together this panel, is a range of skill sets, of approaches to architecture. We at our department keep trying because we have 880 students, and I think that a very small number of them will go on to become licensed practicing architects. And that's okay. The Billings Index is flatlined. That's fine, but it's not fine if you are at or below the federal poverty guideline. So I think there are many, many different ways to approach this profession. Response?
No, I absolutely agree. I think that's I think City College, or at least the faculty that I've been working, have been doing an absolutely great job trying to bring educators and practitioners who do different things. And I think that there is a certain recognition for that and realization. Also, that architects, even though architecture trains to be an architect, I think what's wonderful within the architecture education is that because we we get exposed to so many different things, we we have to learn in order to understand a topic, right? Whenever we choose a topic, or whenever we choose a topic in school, we have to do research. We have to understand many different aspects of design. Sometimes we go into dance, right, and trying to learn how to, if we want to design a dance school, if we want to design something else related, right? Because we are always encouraged to go outside of architecture, right? In our education career, I think that's that needs to be more encouraged to design, graphic design, furniture design, toys, work with community projects, community engagement, co-creation, I don't know, work with spiders, you know, and how spiders create architecture. Either it will end up to be architecture or not. I think what's great is that it offers an avenue for you to, I don't want to call it to escape, but it's kind of is, to deviate and expand your understanding of what else you can do. I mean, architecture to some degree is not a really stable also industry, right? And I think just learn, it's something I would also probably recommend beyond architecture. I think we all still, I don't think it ends. I think it's, everything is a work in progress. And I like to think of myself as a work in progress. I don't really enjoy thinking of myself, this is it, right? This is where I am. And I will, and I think maybe because I'm teaching and I'm seeing students and these young minds thinking, which is extremely motivating, it's also extremely inspiring, is that thinking about or expanding your interest inside of architecture is really probably one of the ways you can also protect yourself in the future, in any case. Thinking about how can you, and I think that's, you know, what else can you do, right, outside of architecture that can give you this other expertise that makes you valuable and still have opinion in other conversations. There, and I think it's happening more than it used to be before, right? I think that there's a certain generation where it was, everything was really architecture, right? At everything architecture, there's community work is done not by architects, it's done by someone else. Co-creation process is done by someone else. And a lot of architects that at least I'm working with are doing a lot of work that is non-architecture. And I think, yeah, I'm not quite sure. Again, this is a conversation and I'm just talking through this. I think one way to think about yourself, despite that you're outside of a school, is still continue learning and be curious. That also helps us to educate others what architecture is, because if we're the only one who know what architecture is, it doesn't help us. So by going these play I'm showing with my hands. This is architecture. This is other avenues, learning other thing, going into art. It's never too late. By that, you also get to meet people. We really need to educate the public, as you said, what architecture is. No one really knows. No one really cares. I still get questions such as, what do you do as an architect? And I'm like, do you design buildings? And I'm like, oh. It's like, no, it's not just that. It's it does many different things. And then they're like, well, are you really an architect? Like, yes.
So perhaps at Thanksgiving, instead of talking politics, pick 3 projects and have your family discuss the merits of 3 projects: art, architecture, culture, and discuss that.
Well, that's one method. I just wanted to ask you, when we say educate the public, well, what does that mean? How? Because I mean, we're all preaching to the choir. Every time we get together in our monthly meetings, et cetera, we're all talking to each other, at each other, with each other, through each other. But the public remains that other space. And in my experience, the public is either my family or my clients. So there's that level of interaction. But how do we, as a collective whole, bring this to the public?
Okay, so little known, when I graduated in '87, 5 of my colleagues and I started a nonprofit organization called Atepa Community Development Association. Lasted for about 5 or 6 years until we all got married and went our separate ways. But it was developed in order for us to educate or to edify our community as to what the architect is for. So we developed all these programs. We had programs at the Smithsonian, the Design Museum. We had programs at the State Building in Harlem, and I would say that we were fairly successful in terms of getting the word out there as to what architects are about. But it's not just that. Young and burning at the heart and trying to get the information out, and then having to live a life. Things take on its own kind of bandwidth, and we moved on. But I think in terms of how we educate the public, we have to do things like that. We have to get out there and have network parties with people that are not architects, educate them as to how and what we're there for. And that's remedial, but it's still, people don't realize how beautiful the spaces that they're in and walking through in order to be able to realize why they like it. Why the textures or why the difference in textures and all of these things. They don't know until you tell them, and they start realizing, oh, wow, that rose really smells nice. Well, I guess that's the connection I'm trying to make, smell the roses. So, that is something, that I think we can do as young architects, as old architects. And that's why I like having him here. I get the rhythm. But that's what we do. We are here to make sure that the common man and woman realize why they are touching a stone and why it feels a certain way. I know it's kind of silly, but my kids, I just walk around touching things and they're like, Dad, come on. Why are you touching the glass? It's glass. Why are you touching the stone? It's stone. But I think eventually they'll appreciate it.
How would you start that conversation? You say, what is architecture? Because what is it? That's a very, is it this house? Is it this place? Is it this stone?
I always start with space and why you feel a certain way in the space as you walk through it. It's just, why is this volume any different from anything else? Or why walking into, an entrance feels tight and then opens up? So it's all of those simple things that we learn as architects that makes something special on 2-dimensional paper become reality in 3 dimensions.
I was gonna hop on that. It's the tile joint. You ever walk into a room and you're like, see the joint? You're like, what are you looking at? See the joint, how it lines up and it brings your eyes down. There's actually a purpose to it, right? For crack joints, and it actually will help the crack to expand and contract beautifully and not ruin your wall. So there's logic behind it, and it's storytelling. Like what you guys are all doing here, beautiful stories. I think as an architect, you're really people oriented, customer service oriented, and you're telling them stories so they can grow and listen and learn and question and challenge you to be better, right? None of us are perfect and we're growing work in progress.
So I'm sorry to keep talking so much, but three-point strategy. Number one, we need more leadership from people of color. That's number one. That's something that we focus on in our department. That means building on communication skills, building on networking skills, getting these young students out to mix and mingle, exactly what you said. Number two is food and wine. So we've started to buy tickets for our students, and we've just stumbled on this idea recently. Buy tickets for our students to go to the opera, go to a play, go to BAM, go where culture is happening, and start to build a vocabulary, a literacy of what's happening on the ground outside of exactly what you said, outside of the architecture environment. Number three is history. We don't have in our department, and I suspect in some others, we don't have an actionable history that's being taught. A lot of architectural history is very limited. It does not talk about a greater social, political evolution of architecture and the role architecture has played in that in the United States. There are some schools that are starting to work on that, but generally our program, we have been weaker in history, and we are working on that. We're hiring more faculty to start developing those type of courses. So it's definitely food and wine, it's definitely history, and it's definitely getting people outside of the department.
And onto TikTok.
I want to pick up on your question, and it's a personal story about how I got into architecture. So I grew up in Brooklyn. I grew up in this public housing development called Marcus Garvey, designed by Peter Eisenman back in the 70s. And then when I lived there, it was across the street from the towers in the park. But our development was different. And it was scratching my head like, why is this different? And I said, it's the environment that's making it different. It's like, they're not treating us as if we're people who live in a tower. They're treating us as a community. And so that made me think about how architecture can influence how people live in their environment. And that's the thing that sort of got me going into the civic architectural world. Like, to me, that's most important. Like, every time my kids had a career day at school, I was the black architect who talked about architecture, which was, not the Brady Bunch. It was something that they didn't expect. That's why I work at the New York City School Construction Authority, because we can influence them early in life and tell them how an environment can change your outlook on life. So just to answer your question.
Share your name and your question.
Hi, my name is Angeline. This is for either Austin or Mark or both. Just curious how each of you decided to join the SCA, coming from maybe more like private working environments, and kind of what was the most surprising thing about that transition for you?
I'm going to start.
Besides Diwali.
Right, it's a nice culture there. So like you, I did the treadmill. I like to say I did the architectural tour, like worked with all the names. And the closer you get to the sun, the hotter it gets and it burns, right? And I think COVID made me kind of scratch my head and ask, what am I doing? And where am I going to leave my legacy? And fortunately, most important thing to do in architecture is maintain friendships. A friend of mine's got a position at the New York City School Construction Authority and asked me if I was interested in coming over. And at the time, it was not my gig. And then COVID came and I sort of reevaluated what I'm doing and how I'm giving back to the community. And that organization is like the best place to start, because you're not attacking, but you're teaching children about what architecture is early in life. Most frustrating thing is the bureaucracy, and we're going to break that. The standards that we have. We need to really loosen it up. So and the level of professionalism varies. Like, SOM, it was like, everyone's 100. That the SCA, there are some people who are 10s, and there are some people who are, 20s. And it's like it's all over the
Being
place.
recorded, you know that.
I would say it publicly. I mean, I would say it publicly. But I think what we're trying to do is bring that everyone up to the same level, the same level of expectation. And so that's the next challenge, I feel.
Sure. So the question was, how did you know it was time for you to make a pivot in your career or career change? Was that you? It's similar. Dovetail on what Austin said. It's your relationships. I'm 30 plus years into my career. I've come full circle twice, if you could come full circle twice, in terms of people that I've started my career with and meeting them in the middle, and then again towards the sunset of my career, where we are now. I am now.
No, we're architects.
Tough
We got 20 more years.
Yeah, exactly. Well, sunset is a long way off, but it's your relationships. And again, you're going to be in this career for a long time. It's a small world, as though you may think it's, you're meeting millions of people and thousands of people through your lifetime. This community, these people, you're going to see them again. You're going to meet them from the developers all the way down, all the way through the process, the building department. Throughout your career, you're going to run into these folks again. So again, how I ended up here, it wasn't necessarily by choice. Again, many of these things, it's living life. For instance, becoming building commissioner of Mount Vernon, there was no way in the beginning of my career that I would have thought that I would get into government, because that's something that I stayed away from because I didn't like politics at all. 12 years after running my own firm and working from soup to nuts, small development of a bathroom to multi-million-dollar projects, you learn everything on your own, and you learn. Well, I learned it through a small firm initially, LeJean Johnson McNeil, a Harlem-based firm. And working in a small firm, you learn to work through all of the processes from beginning to end. And then you take that on to your own kind of trajectory, and you start running your own firm and work through the systems of the building department, from the commissioners in the building department all the way up through the top of the line. Therefore, I had an understanding of what it took to get through all of the processes in architecture and building and design. Someone asked me to throw my hat in the ring to become commissioner of buildings for the 5th largest city in New York State. That was unfathomable for me. And so initially I said, no, I'm satisfied running my own firm, doing my own thing. My family's growing. We're doing our thing here. We're great. 6 months later, they said, Mark, it's still open. Just throw your hat in the ring and see how it goes. And obviously, I made it through the process of panels and all of the development agents and everyone within the community that endorsed me and moved me forward as commissioner of buildings. The things that you learn during your growth to where you are opens those doors to things that you would never think that you would do. So leave your, I'll cut it short. Be open-minded. Know that you're not going to necessarily end up where you think you're going to end up. And just keep working forward and make those relationships work as you move through life.
Thanks, Mark. I do have a question for Hal, and then I have a question for everyone. So Hal, and at FX, you're the Director of Design Technology. What role did you take on? What does that mean? How do you bring in emerging technologies? And, we talked a lot about teaching the generation of architects, the new generation, and the current generation, and folks outside of architecture. So do you want to share a little bit?
Sure. Easy question. I guess what I do really is solve problems, and a lot of times those are problems that other people don't see. Because the last thing you want to get is a phone call Friday night and some team is having a problem doing something and there's a deadline. There's always a presentation, there's always problems. So what I do is I ask why a lot, and I observe a lot, and I see how people work. And I always used to say, if I'm doing my job to the best of my ability, it's possible no one would even notice because things would just work seamlessly, right? There's documentation that people can easily find. It makes sense. They know how to solve the problem. If you're trying to introduce a new way to fix something, it might be something that no one else has even considered before. And you're sort of taking a step back and saying, why are we working like this? What are we trying to get? What's the end goal? What's the deliverable? And by asking these questions, you can sort of break down the process a little bit. I will say that at FX, one of the first things we do for any new project is really talk about, is it an opportunity to leverage new technologies, new collaboration strategies, or anything like that? And in terms of finding new technologies and how things that I look for, part of it's networking, as we were talking about. It's a very small industry in some ways, and you see the same people, so you get a good beat on what other people are doing. But just because it's new and shiny, like AI or VR or something, doesn't really mean that it's useful. It doesn't mean that there's necessarily a place for it. And the last thing you want to do is jam something down people's throats and say you have to use this, and people are saying, well, the way I was doing it was just fine. So I look at how people work, and I don't want to redo any work. I don't want, if my program crashes, I don't want to redo even 5 minutes of work. So it really pains me when people come up to me and say, I lost half a day. And I'm saying in the back of my mind, how can I prevent that? What's something that I could do that people might not even be aware of? So the next time someone has a catastrophic failure, I can say, oh, no problem. I have an automated way to back this up. So part of it is being aware of what people are doing. Technology does help with that. You can automate a lot of things in a way that wasn't that feasible pretty recently. So you can keep tabs on projects, on phases, see if there's problems as they arise. So I think a lot of it is really communicating, is being aware, and yeah, I don't know. I'm going to go with that.
Amazing. Thank you.
Can I ask you a question? So where does your facility with systems come from? How did you learn that to be?
Easy question to
Yeah. What
No,
was
no,
the?
you can.
Oh,
How did you, sorry.
yeah. Sorry, I'm not gonna.
I was going to ask you, how did you learn to get this agile with different types of systems and software and processes? Where do you learn that?
So I mentioned before I really liked computers. I've liked them growing up, and the first thing I really learned how to do was use Microsoft Excel. And I know it sounds very silly, but I was fortunate enough to have someone at the time who was showing me cool things to do. And even in junior high, you can make a flyer, you could put together some type of data analysis and make a pie chart. And if you really dig deeper, you can start doing macros, heavy data analysis, cross looking at different tables. So even I would say back then, I was already aware of kind of the power of data, how you can visualize things to explain to people why you want them to pick a certain option over another, or giving them more facts. So I've always kind of looked at an operational side of things, and I was, I guess, fortunate enough to be able to dovetail technology with that. And I don't have a better answer than that, but it's something that I've always been. I wouldn't say it's laziness. It's more of efficiency. I've always, even in school, I was thinking, why, you see people beating their head against the wall when they're using AutoCAD, or if they're using Revit and having a really bad time. And, I don't think, I never looked at computers like that. So for me, it was always a tool and not necessarily the solution. So it's figuring out how to use the tool so it's not hindering you. And, part of that is figuring out what, taking a step back. And I know I said it already, but it's really, what's the goal in this? What's the deliverable? How am I trying to present this? and then you can sort of work backwards from there, and you have a starting point, and you just think about what you can do to be more efficient in the process. And I guess that's just how I think about things.
Does anyone else have any questions for each other?
All right. So before we take a quick snack break, I do want to thank Judy. She's been recording everything. Thank you. And we're going to give Judy, James will do the intro for Judy.
So Judy Hasegawa is our NanoWall rep. So we're going to pay a bill and hear from one of our favorite sponsors. Do you want to come up, Judy, and give a quick elevator pitch? And then we're going to have a quick recess, grab a snack and a beer, and go into breakouts.
Hello, my name is Judy Hasegawa with NanoWall Systems. Nice to meet y'all. Thank you so much for having me over. I'm the architectural representative and showroom manager of NanoWall Systems. Happy to be here, happy to support. And so we're gonna see just a few quick projects of New York NanoWall Systems to give you a range of what we can offer and what kind of solutions we can help you with. Oh, yes, clickers are fantastic. If you don't have one, highly recommend it. So we're going to start here locally in Brooklyn in a wonderful brownstone where we have tiny little windows in the back, and it's like, well, what can we do? We can open it up because we love daylight. And so open it up, make a brownstone, fantastic. It saved this couple's marriage during COVID, by the way. It went in 2019. And so if you want to save relationships, operable glass walls are a fantastic way to go. In addition to that, education. This is Hunts Point in the Bronx, New York Public Library. I don't think grand opening has happened yet. And so we're really excited to be supporting the educational landscape with flexible spaces with operable glass walls. This is the only open picture I can find to give you a sense of how large the opening could be. And then moving more into commercial, when we're looking for flexible spaces from private banquets all the way to large parties, entire weddings, operable glass walls are a fantastic way to give venues the flexibility to choose what kind of environment they want to offer their guests of honor. Last but not least, we're going to circle back to Midtown here. And so for amazing commercial projects, and even if you want to look at the ocean or the mountains, and you need to have an amazing view of the world outside and don't want to sacrifice any of your sight lines, we have some amazing tall multi-track sliders. This is the top of Pen 2 by Vornado Realty Trust in the middle of Midtown with sight lines straight down to the Freedom Tower. This is triple glazed, 13 feet tall, 5 feet wide. And so for any kind of application you may be working with and looking for a solution, I have my information at the back. And then to circle back to the topic of the evening, I started with a drawing degree, went by furniture land, and now in architecture and getting into marketing. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Judy.
You can go ahead and continue with your questions, or you can help us select the top 3 of those professions that you think are important for future architects. So what do you recommend as the next gen architect skills? You've heard many of the parallel pathways. There's a lot more out there. Yeah, we wanted to put one panelist per cluster. And if you want to rearrange the chairs, you can. All right, so Sanjeev, which cluster do you want to sit in?
I hate to interrupt great conversations that I've been peeking in on. I wanted to thank everyone for coming for our second AMA event. We're gonna have, this is a series, so we're gonna have another one coming up in a few months. And then that one will be more on CVs and how to conduct yourself and how to market yourself a little bit better. And then the following, it'll turn into hopefully maybe how do you get project management experience or any sort of management experience. So hopefully this has been valuable. What we want to do now is we gave you all some sheets for Next Gen Architect skills and what each of you and your groups thought was valuable for the Next Gen Architects. And we're gonna use that, so please fill it out. If all of you wanna fill it out, we'll collect it and then we'll start to document this for ourselves. But we also wanna hear from you, and Me's gonna take some notes on your discussions today. And each group, you can select someone to be a speaker. We're gonna take key takeaways from your discussions and then maybe next steps. So which group would like to go first? Mark. Austin said Mark is first. Okay, who's the speaker for the group?
Hello. My name is Deja. I'm a recent graduate, and our group said our 3 things are social impact and community, and particularly talking about communication. We talked about future-ready skills and adaptive design strategies, and critical thinking and problem solving were our top 3. Next steps, key takeaways for sure was just talking about our different areas of expertise coming from different places, and just thinking about how all of these 3 things definitely all come together in everything we're trying to do. And yeah.
Anyone else from this group would like to add?
I think your point about communication being something that maybe should have been on this list. So we had a conversation about communication skills. Didn't quite find an exact match on here. So
I'm curious what group is going to put indoor air quality. Let's find out.
Yes, indoor air quality, 100%. Okay, Austin.
Our group was totally off script. And we really talked about our experience in school. And then we did talk a little bit about sort of the format of today's get-together. And our recommendation was sort of maybe push the questions out to the audience more, and have maybe the panels do a quick introduction of who they are, but then have the audience, it should be really more about audience interaction, and we felt that could have been improved. Sorry, off script. We were totally off script. We were just riffing.
Well, to put you on the spot, what do you think, forget this list, is the next gen architect skills that are necessary?
So I think that's an interesting question, because I think the skills here are kind of relative to architecture, but I think more importantly are the skills that aren't relative to architecture, or like soft skills that make someone kind of professionally dependable or available to kind of succeed in a workplace environment, because I think those types of things are a lot harder to teach, right? Like effective time management isn't something you necessarily can teach to somebody, but it's something somebody has to learn. And I think in an architecture office, school requires you to focus on maybe 1 project, if not 2 projects at a time. But in an office, you could have 3 or 4 different projects in different stages. So if you don't have the ability to kind of manage your time properly, or kind of have a way to keep track of what you're working on, it's going to be super easy to get overwhelmed very quickly. And so, I mean, I think all of these are really important, and I think they all have a place in our future. But I think the things that you can't teach are almost more important to provide a kind of solid foundation to succeed in the workplace and to become a architect.
Thank you, that was a great one. Sasha, any key takeaways from your group? You can pick anyone or you can share. Okay, Chelsea.
So we had a really good conversation about, all have very different backgrounds and different paths, but we all really agreed that social impact and community were really important, because how do we communicate to the people that we're working for and with, and help the communities in general, health and well-being, especially post-pandemic. How do we create spaces that people are comfortable in, and all people are comfortable in, because a lot of people are comfortable in different kinds of situations. And we also talked about critical thinking and problem solving, because in general that's kind of what we do. We're given a problem, how do we solve it? And we also picked a fourth, which is policy implementation experts, just because it is really important to know what's going on and what the new innovations and new laws and things like that are.
Thank you.
Can I add to that? What are your next steps now that you've identified those top priorities in your group?
What are some next steps now that you've identified these priorities? Who wants to take it?
I don't think we've gotten there yet, but we'll think about it.
That's for the future AMA. Great. Jen, your group, what were some discussions and key takeaways?
Hi, Kelsey. We also went off script and didn't address the top 3 next-gen architect skills. It was just more of a conversation about our prospective career paths and how development, architecture, the intertwining of the two at Alloy. So it was interesting, and yeah.
Well,
I don't know.
I think we should definitely talk through all of the flavors of architecture and development pathways there.
Yeah, and I think even having these discussions and being in the room together and just having conversations is a really useful skill to have, and starting to make a network of more people.
Thank you. And Hal, your group, what did you guys discuss, and key takeaways and next steps?
My name's Joe. Our group, we kind of talked about technology integration and the different phases of architecture and how you can approach it from a studio-wide holistic view down to an individual project view. That was something that our group really talked about. And something that wasn't on the list was just making sure that you're out there networking and getting to know your peers was something that some of us are looking for work, some of us are looking for sponsors, and it was just, it felt very wholesome to be in a group where we're all supporting each other. And I think that that's something that AIA does a really good job with. And then the third one was clean air. No, just kidding. It's just growing as peers and appreciating what AIA Brooklyn does.
Thank you. I'll let me take it from here.
Thank you. We have a lot of opportunities for you to engage in more events. This is look into becoming a citizen architect and what that means. And I think each of you as panelists and guests, everybody touched on it. It's a social skill, it's giving back, it's teaching, telling your story, and practicing telling the story well. Civic engagement, public service, advocacy, education and mentorship, ethical responsibility. Every architect has a responsibility, a fiduciary role to protect the best interests, the health, well-being of the citizens around the community that we live with, the community, global, local, you name it. And then, so the Brooklyn Emerging Professionals Committee, this is a twofold. One is about the architect's registration exam study. We are always in need of licensed architects, and especially recently licensed architects, to help facilitate and share the subject matter. And there's learning units with this. So there's 2 learning units because you're teaching about the envelope system, project management, contracts, And this is ongoing on a twice-a-month basis. So, and then we have AMA, if you are interested in helping us coordinate the next event in February, March, as well as becoming a panelist. Remember, the panelist is your voice in storytelling. You don't have to be a seasoned architect. You can be as young and emerging right out of college. We want to hear all of your stories. There's also Committee on the Environment. That's another committee in the Brooklyn chapter. Engage into sustainability so that it is integral in your design. It's not a separate silo. Hear more about it. If this is your passion, join that committee. Custom Residential Architecture Network, CRAN. There are chapter-based CRAN groups, committees, and the Brooklyn chapter has a very vibrant one, and it's led with David Cunningham, one of our directors. This is our next general meeting, and it is an uncertainty discussion panel that we've coordinated with City Tech and Sanjeev, so that November 20th is the next one. You can scan it or look up Eventbrite AIA Brooklyn for more info. I'll give that another second.
You want to mention the subject?
Oh, the next subject is called labor. That's all I say about that. Okay, so we are looking to generate some sponsors for sending emerging professionals to conferences, leadership conferences. We talk about soft skills, talk about practicing your stories. That's where it's at the Women Leadership Summit. This occurs annually. Next one is in Atlanta. It's great. The best story is in 35 words. That's what I just recently learned. And of course, there's Next to Lead. I think Chelsea can speak a little bit on that. So speak with Chelsea if you're interested in this Next to Lead. And there's internships. I have to bring in the SCA one more time. The SCA is a feeder for high school internships and college internships. They are paid. So if you're interested, you can check the SCA website. Not only that, I think Mark Warren mentors small minority women business entrepreneurs, MWB, it's hard to say that. And I don't like using those acronyms because it's important to know that it's minority women, all of that. So mentoring does exist at all tiers, not just from high school level, and the Brooklyn chapter is looking to expand that a little bit further with collaboration with FXCollaborative to bring that into the education of primary school for exposing them to architecture as well. There's Industry Day on November 21st. I think that's fully closed out, but there is a Teams option. And here's our calendar. If you want to scan onto the Brooklyn Emerging Professionals Slack channel, go for it. That's all I have to say for tonight. Sarah, you have any words?
Yeah, I just want to thank everybody for being here. Our panelists, they're wonderful. Me and Chitra, thank you for putting this together. James and Kelsey, your part. Judy Hasegawa, I know she gave a NanoWall presentation, but to me she is Superwoman. And when we were wondering who can film that event, the first person was Judy. I went to the Eventbrite website to look and see, because she's usually the first person who signs up for our events. So I figured she must be busy, she wasn't on it. And then I saw her saying, yes, I'm in. So thank you, Judy. Please give a hand to everybody here, including yourselves. Thank you so much, and Marissa, thank you from FXCollaborative. Very much appreciate everything you're doing too. And I think this is an adjournment, right? Yes. Please grab some snacks, grab some drinks, have a safe trip home.